Have you ever noticed how you can have very different techniques for different people or different cues for different people and still get a really good result? Today, myself and Tom are going to go over 2 different postures and how you can look at 2 different postures based on their technique, their programming, and mainly their SBD lift techniques as well.
So posture is a very variable thing. We see posture change daily, monthly, depending on what we're training, how strong we're feeling, etc., etc. However, there are 2 end ranges or 2 extremes we can see within this posture sort of continuum. So these are the archetypes that Josh was talking about. So between George and I, we are both going to represent the 2 end ranges or the 2 extremes. So if we take a look at George from the sides, George turns sideways to the camera. What we're looking for here is we're looking more at like what a gorilla style posture would be. And the easiest way to visualize a gorilla style posture is if we imagine a gorilla has a lot of shape or a lot of curves to their spine. So looking at George here, we can see his rib cage moves backwards and has a little bit of a hunchback position. And if we push in against his shirt, we can see how his lumbar or his lower back actually moves forward into extension. So looking at this from a total body view through his torso, we have like this S shape that's occurring from a side view through the spine. Compared to myself, if I turn sideways now, I am more what you would consider something along the lines of a Dorito style posture. So a Dorito is like the chip, is completely flat and straight. So from a side view here, what I would look like is straight up and down through my spine. So my thoracic or my chest is going to be much more forward, and my hips are going to be a little bit more tucked under compared to George's, but it's stuck out in a bit more of like an anterior pelvic tilt or lumbar extension. So from a side view, I'm going to look like I have a flat, straight spine, which is going to be more of my upper back in thoracic extension, and then my hips in posterior tilt, so my lumbar is in lumbar flexion. And we're 2 good examples of those extremes. So any lifter's posture is going to be somewhere between these 2 extremes. And each lifter probably has a benefit being pushed towards each end based on their technique, their style of lifting, their accessories, or even just their anthropometry.
So here are some cues or ways you can think about cueing your clients or yourself in regards to a Dorito lifter. So I'm going to go through that with you now with Tom. So as Tom is that more flat back or flat spine position, when he's thinking about doing any sort of like big compound movement lifts, he's going to be wanting to cue a few different things. One, if we start from the top down, he's going to be wanting to think about a bit more of an upright chest position. This is going to allow or enhance a bit more thoracic extension, which is going to align exactly with what his spinal curves are asking him. If we go down the chain a little bit more, we want to be focusing on a little bit more of a tuck or posterior pelvic tilt, so that way he can act as I guess his hamstrings can work a little bit harder to pull him out of the hole for a squat as an example. And then if he is squatting again, we want to be probably thinking about a little bit more knees out. So when his knees are going out into external rotation, this is going to allow that posterior pelvic tilt to occur a little bit more nicely. So there's 3 ways you can think about it. If you're not sure of like what type of lifter you might be, you can try these 3 things and see how it feels. And if it doesn't feel too crash hot, we can try the gorilla style technique.
So on the other hand, we have the gorilla style posture and some of the cues or positions that we will see a gorilla style lifter move into. What we can imagine is this is effectively going to be the opposite of the Dorito. And this is part of the reason why we can see some people, for example, on their squat, have their knees being pushed out really far, and then other lifters that push their knees together. So we're going to start from the top down with George and go through the same sort of thing. So George turns sideways here. Starting from the top, we're going to see a gorilla benefit more from a rounded upper back. So this is going to look like one of 2 things. It's either going to look like George is going to bring his ribs down, so like his upper abs are bringing the ribs down into a brace position, and then he's pushing his ribs backwards. So we get a bit of that kind of like hunchback or shape to the back of the ribs. Naturally, what that's going to do immediately, as soon as we move into the lumbar, is that's going to create a bit more of a curve in the lumbar. So as you can see here, George has a little bit more of an anterior pelvic tilt, which also assists in creating lumbar extension. So George isn't going to be thinking as much around keeping his hips tucked under like a Dorito. He's going to be letting himself stay in a little bit more of a potential anterior pelvic tilt or more of the natural lordotic curve of the spine. And the reason why he can get away with that is because he doesn't have to bend here as much, because he's bending a lot through his upper back already. So as long as the spine has one aspect that can go into flexion and bend, the other aspect can stay in extension. And then that's going to work really nicely for lifting, because it's going to allow us to equally get down into the squat and come up as well through flexion and extension. So don't forget George to turn front on. The last difference is for the actual squat itself, we're going to see the knees being a little bit more inwards. This is either going to be a byproduct of George thinking about pushing his knees together to feel his adductors, or it's actually going to be a relative change. So if George is in a little bit more of that anterior pelvic tilt where his lower back is engaged, naturally that's going to engage his adductors more. So as a result, with his squat, we will see his knees come together a little bit more into that classic knee valgus position. Whether or not this is good or bad or favorable for you will be determined on what happens at top end for you. For a lot of lifters, it feels like a very strong way of squatting. For other lifters, it feels like it's messing up their squat. So the main thing that you want to do is you want to have a look at your lifting and see whether the cues or the positions work well for George or the gorilla pattern, or they work better for myself and the Dorito pattern.